shows that 911 emergencies are continuing to rise each year across the city. But EMS workers say that there's not enough resources to keep up.
My ambulance, I haven't seen it in...
Props out to Johnny Cash.
So if you're experiencing an emergency, the ambulance coming to save you may not arrive as quickly as one would hope. And while some are blaming traffic congestion for shortages of available ambulances, others say those shortages are because New York City's experiencing more 911 calls than it has in a long time. But one thing's for sure, these shortages of ambulances, they're coming at the worst possible time for New York City.
Clinton Hill neighbors came out in numbers to draw attention to their safety concerns. I spoke with neighbors concerned about the increased litter, noise, and fights outside the two shelters.
10 years ago, it took EMS 9.6 minutes on average to get to a life-threatening call. The response time now 12.4 minutes. The FDNY's response to medical emergencies has nearly doubled.
Local families are terrified of the threat of more attacks, assaults, as are the residents of that shelter.
In Brooklyn, life-threatening emergencies have increased by 15.7% since 2021. It's the highest increase in the city.
This part's getting bad. We all know that it's getting bad.
Obviously, if you come out late night, something might happen.
There have been plenty of recent signs of how bad things have been getting. There's also what locals describe as a constant presence of loitering. 8th Avenue in Manhattan is getting attention, but for the wrong reasons.
EMS union boss Oren Barzilay says delivery trucks and bike lanes are part of the problem.
If the response time is over 10 minutes for those types of calls, the next option for our crews would be probably taken to the morgue.
Yep, he's right.
So New York is experiencing an enormous rise in life-threatening emergencies, yet there aren't enough ambulances to go around. But what nobody's talking about is many of those emergencies have a lot to do with the types of dangerous behavior we as a city have decided we're just going to let slide with no consequences, revealing that our ambulance shortage might not be as complicated as some people think it is. Yes, traffic congestion here is a massive issue, and yes, there have been reports of rising gang violence in our asylum shelters and on our streets. But the overwhelming majority of asylum seekers who've come to New York are not here committing crimes or hurting others. And as it turns out, traffic congestion also isn't to blame for this, even though the roads are packed with cars. Instead, those traffic jams are the fault of environmentally friendly yet flawed road redesigns that create unnecessary gridlock.
Like those stupid bike lanes they put all over Chicago, taking up parking spaces and making more congested traffic when you can't even use the bike lanes for 6 months out of the year.
Streets is now so...
Ain't nobody riding their bike in the middle of a fucking snowstorm. Let's park their cars there and not make traffic worse. But that's part of the own nothing. You will own nothing and you will have nothing and you will be happy with it.
Are up 5% this year and 40% over the last 5 years, making it clear our city has an out-of-control safety problem that's been growing since before the asylum crisis became a crisis. Which brings us to the real reason we've now got an ambulance shortage in this city. Yes, we've got rising violence. Yes, we've got crazy traffic. But decisions made by our leaders have been making those two problems worse for a very long time. Because as you're about to see, our revolving door justice system that releases dangerous repeat criminals who assault others is one thing, but it's quite another for city planners to build things that create traffic jams on purpose just to disincentivize driving, which, if you look around, obviously isn't working. And now our ambulances are trying to rescue people in our progressive high.
I keep bringing up about those stupid bike lanes that can't be used for 6 months out of the year.
You know traffic's bad when the guy on the city bike can't even get through. But all this gridlock, it's a nightmare not just for drivers and commuters, but also for emergency vehicles, because even though they've got sirens and lights, they can turn them on all they want, but with all of this bumper-to-bumper traffic, there's really no way.
And with them making all the bike lanes, like in Chicago, they can't even go around if there's no parked cars there, because they got a big, stupid fucking 2-foot-high fucking cement barrier to block off the bike lane. So then the ambulance can't even go around like that like they used to anymore. All them stupid bike lane concrete things need to be ripped out of the road and give the roads back to the cars. We don't want you will own nothing, you will have nothing, and the government will provide you with everything you want, and whether you like it or not, we'll be happy with it. Fuck that. We the people gotta take our country back, especially since we got Trump back.
for them to get through, and that's a huge problem, leading to increased delays when emergency services try to come and save somebody. But not only do they have more work to do because we're living in an environment where there are more 911 calls than ever before for a variety of reasons, this traffic congestion has actually been made worse by city planners on purpose.
EMS union boss Warren
Even in
says
Chicago.
delivery trucks and bike lanes are part of the problem.
The response time is over 10 minutes for those types of calls. The next option for our crews will be probably take them to the...
So this is extremely important because the EMS supervisor mentions two big problems: delivery vehicles and bike lanes, which you can see we're still putting down out here. But in order to add this bike lane and this pedestrian walkway that two people are standing in right now, the city had to give up 2 lanes that could have been used to improve the flow.
2 lanes on either side.
See, this ambulance right here, it's so big.
That's what I'm talking about. The ambulance could be driving through there, but they want to create gridlock.
It's just sitting in traffic. But you know who else is forbidden from using these pedestrian walkways? Those delivery vehicles, and that's a big issue because look at this place. We got businesses over here, we got businesses over here, we got buildings. These places need supplies. Those get dropped off in big trucks. Where's that truck gonna park? They're not allowed to park out here in all this empty space. Oh no, don't do that. No, they gotta park over there in the street where you only have 3 lanes, obstructing one of those lanes, and now you're down to 2 lanes. It's an absolute disaster. Now, it's important to understand that before we get into how rising violence might be contributing to increasing 911 calls, that you understand this recent road redesign wasn't supposed to be a problem because of congestion pricing, which is what these toll readers are for, but it's been put on pause.
Disgusting.
However, proponents of this plan to tax every single car on the road thought that it was going to be the savior of our traffic problems, at least in Manhattan anyways, because people were going to have to pay a significant amount of money every single day just to have a vehicle on the road here. But the reason congestion pricing's been shut down is because not only was it going to create more traffic problems elsewhere, many people deemed it completely unaffordable for the everyday working man. But if you think this is stupid and absolutely ridiculous, put your seatbelt on because it's about to get even worse, and we still haven't got to any of the issues that are causing the volume of 911 calls our EMS services are getting to go through the roof.
You can look no further than 34th Street for bus lane violations, people driving and parking.
They're doing this in Chicago too right now.
Monday, that could all change with fines in the mail. This New York City traffic.
So not only have we made the roads smaller,
Chicago's doing that too, where they got a thing that's going to give you a ticket in downtown Chicago if you drive in the bike
we have
lane.
ourselves a beautiful looking bus lane. Got the bus stopping here to pick up passengers. That's how things should work, but doesn't work thousands of times a day when it gets obstructed by vehicles that use it when they shouldn't be. Even bikes in the bus lane are a problem, and the city allows this to happen. And this is kind of ridiculous
Just
because
get
if
rid of
city
the
were to keep
fucking bus
lanes
lane.
clear, they could also be used by emergency vehicles that have to get places quickly. But look, see, you got people driving in the bus lane, using it to take shortcuts, using it to get around traffic jams. What a mess. But we allow this because none of these people are getting in trouble for doing it. But it gets even worse because even when the city does crack down and issue fines and tickets to people, nobody pays them. Look at this. They got $1 billion in outstanding fines, revealing that lawlessness isn't just a problem in our criminal underworld. It's a problem pretty much everywhere among all facets of society. And as we'll soon see, yes, rising violence has a lot to do with why there are more reasons for ambulances to go places and try to save people. But when the city fails in its mission to maintain orderly streets, those ambulances cannot do their job, which makes our streets even less safe than they already are, exacerbating the problems our EMS crews face in the first place. And before we get into the crime component of this, realize that any emergency is going to be impeded by lawless streets, even if it's something as simple as traffic violations. If there's some sort of emergency that might not require an ambulance, but requires a police car, like this one right here, how are they going to get somewhere quickly if there are cars in front of them, if there are cars behind them? This puts the whole city in a worse place. All because none of the people with college degrees who decided to redesign our roads to disincentivize driving, a practice people rely on, never realized this would cause problems that are irreversible. So,
on top of, they can only be used for 6 months out of the year when we don't got freezing temperatures and snowstorms.
What about the other problems that are leading to a greater need for emergency services in the first place? What about rising crime? What about rising violence? And is there any connection at all between any of this and the asylum crisis? What about that?
Hey, love wellness. Getting your daily dose of nutrients doesn't have to be messy.
All between any of this and the asylum crisis? What about that? are, 8th Avenue, Manhattan, an area of town that many locals have suggested is not exactly as safe as it used to be. This is an area that has a lot of ambulance calls headed to it. Obviously, we're surrounded by them, which puts an incredible strain on emergency medical services. And look at this thing out here. It's parked in the middle of a bike lane. I don't even know how it was able to get in there, but while it's here, it can't be somewhere else, and that's a big problem. And now the question is,
we'll pick this video back up in a minute.
Rise in ambulance calls. Is this related to one specific crisis in our city, or is it a citywide problem happening everywhere?
Said 911 emergencies are continuing to rise each year across the city. Brooklyn has both the highest rate of calls and also the largest increase since 2021. But EMS workers say that there's not enough resources.
So look at that. As bad as 8th Avenue might be with all the crime and illegal activity taking place here, EMS shortages are actually worse out in Brooklyn, which could be for a couple of reasons. Brooklyn is very large geographically, and they have similar staffing levels to Manhattan as far as ambulances go. They have further to go between trips. That could be one problem. But what we can tell is that it's not related to the asylum crisis, because if you look at this map here of Brooklyn, all of those red dots are shelters for asylum seekers. There are about as many here as there are in Manhattan, which has 49. Brooklyn's got 48. Excuse me, Brooklyn has 49, Manhattan has 48. But Queens, they've got the most shelters. They've got 69 of them, but that's not where most of the 911 activity is. You'd think that if 911 activity were related to the asylum crisis, there'd be some sort of correlation here, but there isn't. Now, that doesn't mean that just like 8th Avenue here, there aren't occasional 911 calls to areas of town that might have an asylum shelter. This doesn't excuse the presence of gangs in one or two of the shelters that are making things much more dangerous for the people who live there who aren't here to commit crime. But shelters that have been reported as having a lot of gang activity inside of them, there's only 3, maybe 4 in total, and the city has almost 200 facilities like this. The same places are the ones that keep making their way into the news over and over again. But even though there's no connection between that and our ambulance shortage, there is a connection between overall rising crime in this city. And when you've got assaults up 40% over the last 5 years, when you've got the former governor of New York City getting assaulted with his stepson while he's walking his dog down the street, which requires a 911 call and emergency services, taking people to the hospital to get checked out, the problem's pretty clear. It's happening everywhere. In fact, things are particularly bad in certain areas of Brooklyn, like the downtown area, where a McDonald's in a very busy location was on the receiving end of collateral damage from crazy people who decided to use weapons in the middle of the road one afternoon. Criminals who, by the way, were never apprehended. They escaped on foot, which means they're still out there, and that's the issue. These streets are dangerous because we've got bad people walking around on them, fearing absolutely nothing, thinking they can do whatever they want. And lately, there's even been a crime wave involving attacks on elderly New Yorkers. Just senseless, rampant violence out of nowhere, all of it leading to 911 calls. And observers say if we're just going to allow people to get randomly attacked and not catch those people, not stop them, not pass laws that put them in jail, we shouldn't be surprised when we've got ambulances headed out the door every 15 seconds to save somebody.
City data shows EMS response times went up by more than a minute between 2021 and 2023, and the number of ambulances on the road decreased by 11%.
We are budgeted to handle about 4,200 calls a day, and there are days where we are doing 4,500, 46. Sometimes we touch 5,000.
Yeah, there's the issue. Our EMS workers, they're getting thousands of calls a day above the capacity that they're budgeted to handle. No wonder these folks are overworked. No wonder there are shortages. And these calls are happening all over the place. Every single neighborhood. This is a city.
My husband's peg went from 4 to 6.8 inches and gets hard as steel even at 64 years old. If he can do it, any man can, using this trick. Most men think that what makes his size be small is a genetic or blood flow factor. Because of that,
And these calls are happening all over the place. Every single neighborhood. This is a city-wide problem. But funding for our EMS services, hiring more people, staffing more ambulances, that's only part of the problem. Because what good's that going to do if they can't move through traffic and get anywhere? There will always be shortages as long as we have that problem. But we better do something quick, because the folks that are responsible for driving these things and taking care of us in an emergency, they can't be overworked forever if we expect them to work forever, that's for sure.
Employees say salary raises can help.
Give us a reason to stay. Give people a reason to want to join EMS, and then we'll fill those spots.
To encourage many.
So there you have it. This all comes down to money. We've got to pay people more if we want to have these things staffed as is, and we spent a whole bunch of money to get to this problem of traffic gridlock, because redesigning all these roads to be narrower and smaller and more congestion cost a lot, and we've spent that money. We can't get it back. And now New York finds itself having to make the best of a bad situation, a mess of its own making, so to speak. It's possible for the city to do that, but it's going to require people to get out here and remove cars from the road that are in the way of emergency vehicles. Like if you've got vehicles that are illegally parked, blocking these things from getting to an emergency, every second counts. That shouldn't be tolerated, and if people get fines for doing that, they should have their registration or something voided. There should be real consequences, just like there should be real consequences for those who hurt people and trigger 911 calls in the first place. How bad is the traffic? Give me your honest opinion. You know better than anybody.
It's terrible. Horrendous.
Because those stupid bike lanes.
With the congestion price.
Have a good one, my friend. Take care. Yep. He's right. And as long as our roads remain the way that they are, as congested as they are, eventually there will be public willpower to reactivate congestion pricing, and it's going to happen. Meanwhile, we've got vast unused pieces of road like these bike lanes and these pedestrian pathways. Look at that. Would it be cheaper in the long run and better for New Yorkers to redesign our streets so that we don't have these problems? Do we need 20 feet of pedestrian space and an extra 10 feet of bike lane space dedicated just for those purposes? But more importantly, should we put the people in jail who are the entire reason 911 keeps ringing in the city? Would that be a good idea? Would that lower our crime rates and our ambulance shortages at the exact same time? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.
Another one of his videos.
Our sources call this Operation Roosevelt. It all begins today from cracking down on these illegal vendors to cleaning up garbage on the streets and seizing illegal scooters. All of it to clean up and bring back this neighborhood.
So for months, the streets of this working class neighborhood have been overrun with every type of crime you can imagine. And finally, law enforcement is here to tear down what is essentially a strip mall full of stolen goods and businesses offering illegal services. But while this operation is off to a promising start, residents are worried that once police leave, the criminals will all come back, leading to a resurgence of crime in a neighborhood that's already way past its breaking point.
NYPD will be working to reduce retail theft and the sale of stolen goods.
Just after dawn, hundreds of NYPD officers, state police officers gathered at 83rd and Roosevelt to begin the process of cleaning up what people here have been complaining about for years.
Jose Restrepo told us in Spanish and in English the lack of public safety reminds him of the crime-ridden villages in his home country of Colombia.
Damn, Damn, he said it reminds him of Colombia being in America. That's not good.
2023, the number of these vendors continue to grow exponentially, and the number of robberies in the stores around here is going off the chart.
That's bad. He's saying the crime's worse here than in Colombia.
We are going to shut all you down before this 90 days are over. We are
Hell yeah, Trump 2024.
Only do so much, with some of these reopening under a different name, just days after getting shut down.
We've done several raids, but what we notice is that you can't just close one thing down because tomorrow they'll be there again.
Things are so bad in this neighborhood that the governor has deployed the state police. But what nobody's talking about is even though this crackdown is achieving the visual result of clean streets and less vendors, none of the gang-affiliated criminals responsible for any of this lawlessness have been put in jail, which means it's only a matter of time before they return, and that's what residents are worried about. Because although everyone supports the police and is glad they're here, with so many simultaneous crime waves happening in our city, the reality of a months-long police surge in one part of town means there will be a months-long opportunity to commit crime somewhere else, which has been happening all year long every time there's been a police crackdown for any reason. And the first time this happened was when the National Guard was deployed to secure our crime-ridden subway, along with 1,000 2,000 extra police officers. Taking all those cops off the streets allowed the city to experience an unexpected rise in moped-related crimes, with armed thugs robbing diners at expensive restaurants, stealing watches right off people's wrists. But after police turned their attention to moped-related crime, another crime wave popped up in Central Park with a gang targeting people for the exact same sorts of items. Which brings us to the real reason why this massive surge of police activity may not stop the illegal strip mall that's taken over Roosevelt Avenue in Queens from coming back. Something in the future will happen that draws police away, at which point the criminal element that's lying in wait will return and reopen, which, as you're about to see, is what's been going on in this part of town for months. And although the streets here might look clean today, residents fear it's not gonna last. People are driving all kinds of stuff on the road these days, and the worry is that without a constant police presence in this area of Queens, once the police pull out, the worry is that the criminals are just going to come right back, because that's what they've done every other time there's been a crackdown on the illegal activity going on here. The police can confiscate all the mopeds they want, they can shut down all the vendors, confiscate all their goods, yet they still come back and reopen. It's been a constant battle that's been going on here. Now, it's important to understand that criminal activity in this neighborhood, it's been a problem for a very long time, since before New York City even had an asylum crisis. However, even though most of the asylum seekers who've come here, over 200,000 in fact, are not here to join gangs or commit crime, a small minority of people have exploited that situation to their advantage and are now using it to commit even more crime than we've seen on our streets in a long time.
We're not here for one day and go away. We're here for the problem to go away.
Mayor Adams making that bold promise and setting a 90-day target to clean up the illegal vendors plaguing Roosevelt Avenue.
9 lieutenants, 42 sergeants, 176 police officers, and they took action today.
So this crackdown, it's going to work. You've got hundreds of police, you've got state police. Everyone is motivated to see a change happen here. The only question now is, how long is that change actually going to last? And although everyone wants to see success here, it's a 90-day operation that was announced on the news. Do criminals watch the news too? They might. If they do, they know that after a 3-month vacation, they can come back. And I was just over at Roosevelt Avenue. You will still see people selling things out of suitcases on the side of the road. You will still see illegal vending. And you've still got vans that have their doors partially open, revealing a shopping mall of inventory inside. And if the police show up, these mobile warehouses can just drive away and escape. On top of that, there are large numbers of people in an area where I've seen an open air market with a whole bunch of stuff out on the sidewalks in the past, just kind of waiting there with big trolleys and carts full of stuff that you can't really see because it's still boxed up. Maybe there's nothing to see there, or maybe they're waiting for a potential opportunity to set up shop and make money again. Either way, you get this feeling on Roosevelt Avenue now that even though things are in the open, you've got a criminal element lurking in the shadows, just waiting for the right moment to come back out of them. But the problem is, the only reason police resources were deployed here to begin with was because local residents and activists protested and they did not only a permanent police presence, but also for more of the 3 existing police precincts that are supposed to cover this neighborhood. Obviously, the resources aren't present for them to do their jobs. But they are not getting a constant police presence. Instead, they're getting a temporary crackdown with resources that may not be there forever, along with a promise that after the 90-day police surge is over, things will be reassessed and the city will decide how many resources to keep there. Hopefully it's a lot. They're going to need it.
This afternoon, the FDNY hauled away a pair of out-of-code propane tanks from a food vendor on Roosevelt Avenue. The enforcement is part of a newly established task force that also involves more than 170 police officers and more sanitation workers to haul away the seemingly endless piles of garbage.
So literally every single thing that can go wrong and can be illegal, it's all happening right on Roosevelt Avenue. Everything from illegal mopeds to illegal businesses to people selling illegal gas tanks. What if those exploded? That would be terrible. Now, throughout these reports, you're going to hear the term multi-agency effort. It keeps coming up, and that term reveals another aspect of how crime in New York City is seemingly allowed to surge with no end in sight. And when you hear the words police crackdown, you tend to think, like I do, okay, they're going to go in there and they're going to arrest the bad guys and lock them up. But that's not what happens. No, instead, they're going to go in there, they're going to give people tickets, they're They're going to confiscate stuff that's not supposed to be there. They're going to shut down businesses that shouldn't be operating or might have permit violations. These other agencies are also going to offer people services who may be homeless or in need. But what this means is if there is something illegal happening with these people who are selling tools out of the back of their white van, if that operation gets cracked down on, the van might get towed, the inventory might get confiscated, but those people, they may end up being free to go, which means they could go and get more inventory and come back to this part of town or another part of town. Crime doesn't take a break. This is what people are doing to make a living right now. It's too bad. But what's really frightening is these aren't folks who have nothing, they've got some stuff they're trying to sell just to make a living and feed themselves. No, this is a coordinated gang-related effort, and it's a lot more sophisticated than it might look.
For like a drill that's like $249, he's selling for like $70. They have their items laid out on big like beach towels. The people that are selling these items, they're not just like one person who's acting on their own. This is kind of like a network.
So this report here, this is from 5 months ago, but this reporter is describing the exact same conditions that I saw myself a week before this crackdown started, and that I still kind of saw when I went up there after it started. And the illegal vending going on was off the charts. You've got entire sections of the street with people selling stuff on both sides of the street. And this is definitely a coordinated effort. I saw one woman selling items on a blanket that were coming out of a suitcase, and that woman, she got her suitcase from a man who walked over to her and handed it to her before she started putting things out on the blanket. I watched that man then walk down the street and hand another similar suitcase to another woman who was doing the exact same thing, creating a sort of illegal open-air strip mall type of thing. That's what this is. And although this has always happened in this section of town to some extent, it's become really bad over the last year as the asylum crisis has reached its current size and scale. Not because of the asylum seekers, but because of a small but active criminal element that has infiltrated their ranks. And that criminal element is growing, finding willing accomplices who are desperate or who aren't desperate but are coerced into joining these criminals and helping them. And before we get into the asylum crisis related aspects of this, it's important to understand that many of the people who are living in our shelters right now, they've fled extreme poverty and they moved into those shelters believing in the promise that the American dream was just a couple of weeks away. They weren't going to have to live in these shelters forever. They were going to get help applying for asylum and help getting jobs, but none of that has happened. So you do have people who are desperate and have spent pretty much everything they had to come here. Now, that's not an excuse for criminal activity, no way, but
and now they're saying it's worse here than where they came from. Well, please go back to where you came from.
In their ranks. But the other problem is that in New York, we've got soft on crime laws. We allow rampant lawlessness, and you may have people who are well-meaning and don't even understand that what they're doing might not be allowed because they see other people doing it. And this is an example of how allowing lawlessness to spread will suck the law-abiding into the criminal underworld even without knowing it. And as long as a dysfunctional system like that keeps operating, these criminals are going to have all the fuel they need to keep operating as well. So this right here is the Stewart Hotel. It's a shelter for families seeking asylum. And although it's a former luxury hotel right here in Midtown, and although that might make it seem like the kind of place that could really help someone if they were to stay there every 60 days, the families in here are supposed to move out and get replaced elsewhere in the shelter system. The city does that because shelter space is limited. These stays have to be temporary. That's their rule. But critics say this system of housing people without actually helping them become part of society is what's leading to folks doing things to survive that they probably shouldn't.
All the vendors that I've observed, they were all migrants who crossed into this country in the last year or two. Throughout 2023, the number of these vendors continued to grow exponentially, and the number of robberies in the stores around here is going off the chart. So this was actually a very dangerous assignment. More than one photographer.
So it's important to understand that unlicensed vending, it doesn't just happen over on Roosevelt Avenue. It happens everywhere throughout the city, even here in Midtown Manhattan, across the street from Macy's. It's prevalent pretty much everywhere at this point, and it's entirely possible that some of the folks you see selling possibly fruit or other items aren't actually part of a gang. But the people selling items that look stolen and still have tags on them, that's another story. There are plenty of folks doing that too, but in a city with no law and order, nothing is going to be done about it, and you can't blame folks who are here and were told they were going to get help and who haven't gotten it from doing what they see other people doing. In fact, look at this. On the same street corner as the shelter, you've got some sort of table display of a person selling stuff. But whether or not this is legal, which it probably is, that's not the issue. The issue is we don't have enough police to stop all of these unlicensed vendors, which means if there's unlicensed vending in one part of town and it gets shut down there, well, it's just going to come to another part of town and open up there. And since we don't have enough police to shut down our epidemic of rampant shoplifting, people are always going to find ways to obtain things that they can sell super cheap almost instantly on the side of the street somewhere.
Jose Restrepo told us in Spanish and in English the lack of public safety reminds him of the crime-ridden villages in his home country of Colombia. 3 months from now, city leaders will...
So it's incredibly sad to hear this, and it's proof that...
Damn, he said it's worse, it's as bad as Colombia. Holy shit.
Again, just so they can get another second chance. That hurts the vulnerable. That hurts your working class neighborhoods, because that's where these people go to commit crime, because that's where there hasn't been an adequate police presence for years. And this is exactly what's been happening on Roosevelt Avenue, which residents protested, fearing that their neighborhood was going to get swallowed up in the same types of crime that many residents of that neighborhood fled in the past. But the plan now is for police to police this area with the help of state troopers for 90 days and then examine the whole situation. And unfortunately, I'm going to translate for you what that means. What that means is that 3 months from today, the crime situation over on Roosevelt Avenue will look very different than it did a week before this whole thing started. There will be less 911 calls. You will have visibly less vendors on the sides of the street, and residents, when interviewed, will say that yes, things have improved. And that right there is going to have the city asking itself if they can maintain this type of environment, this crime-free environment with less resources, because they don't have enough resources as it is. And the problem with asking a question like that is that the only way to answer it is to try and see what happens, which means they're going to pull the police out and see if the neighborhood stays crime-free.
We are going to shut all of you down before this 90 days are over. We are coming for you.
Mayor Adams stressing that this is a 90-day program. They want to get these problems contained within 3 months so that this extra police presence is not a permanent fixture.
So there you have it. 3 months, they're going to clean everything up and then take a look at what things are like. Now, cleaning up the streets, that's one thing, but putting a time limit on it, that is quite another. There could be